The reading today is from John chapter 18, verses 33 through 37. May we open our hearts to the reading of these words. Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom does not belong to this world. If my kingdom belonged to this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So are you a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." May we be granted wisdom and courage for interpretation. Amen.
When I worked at the seminary, it was like you seminary people, it was like the job never, ever ended. And I was, a part of my job was writing and managing these grants. And I remember at one time I had like 5 different grants, and they all had different beginning and ending times. They all had different fiscal years from the seminary's fiscal year. And so I had like all of these different start and stops and stuff. And so I thought one thing that would be really wonderful for this ADD person was to mark liturgical time. And so I changed the light bulb outside my door with a different color for each liturgical season. And I thought it was really cool until my boys got into like middle school and high school, and they were like, "Why do you have these lights outside?" And then the red light was a real problem. So I don't do that anymore. Anyway, so today's the last Sunday on the church calendar. Next Sunday begins Advent. It's a season of reflection, a season living in hopeful preparation for a world of peace that's filled with joy all the while we face and live within the vicissitudes of life. And today in the church calendar, there's a special day called the Feast of Christ the King. Now, when I think of the church calendar, I think of tonsured monks over parchments painting bejeweled pages. And it seems like things were surely created long, long ago in a world so different from ours. But the church, its celebrations, its rituals, and how it addresses the world continues to grow and change. And Christ the King is actually a rather newish holiday in the world of church. It was instituted in 1925 by Pope Pius XI. He looked around the world and was disturbed by what he saw happening. And so he threw all that he had at his disposal to try to stem the tide, or interrupt at least the tide of events that he saw pulling the faithful from the ways of Christ, and to remind his grand flock to what they were called. Pope Pius XI was named Pope in 1922. And soon thereafter, the world witnessed the rise of fascism. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, Germany signed an armistice agreement with the Allies, and World War I was ended. But Europe was devastated by the brutality of this war. And the Treaty of Versailles was the most punitive of treaties that was ever devised in the modern world. The burden of reparations was so great, it left Germany few ways to gain control over rapid inflation and rising poverty. And people began blaming one another instead of the powers that were, who commanded and profited from what had gone on before. And 60 years after the emancipation of slaves, the U.S. saw a rampant rise in the number of lynchings, as well as growing anti-Semitism. Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin all grew to power during this pope's tenure. The world was sliding into global conflict. Totalitarianism, a worldview with easy answers, yes, no answers. Are you with us or against us? Questions such as, do you belong here, or are you a foreigner diluting my race, taking my jobs, robbing my family of its resources, were coughed up by want-to-be and soon-to-be dictators and their pundits. These questions were repeated the world over, conjuring fear and encouraging exclusionary behavior. These questions, repeated the world over, gained a foothold in the hearts and minds of Christians throughout the world. A foothold that pointed people to a worldly kingdom, a deadly kingdom, a kingdom that forces adherence to a set of standards that assures the wealth of some at the cost of most, a kingdom defined by mob mentality. So enter Pope Pius XI and a new church holiday that interrupts the chatter, plants a flag, and claims Jesus as sovereign, ruler of all, even as the dictators, the fascists of the world, desperately and destructively grabbed power and enthroned themselves. Well, the Gospel of John, the writer of the Gospel of John, was a little bit like Kurt Vonnegut, whom I love. He tells you the plot twist at the beginning of the story. And so from the beginning, we're told that Jesus was in fact the King of Israel. Nathan declares, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." And then the gospel goes on to explore that Jesus is not a king that the world would ever recognize. This is a king who speaks to the lowly and the rejected. This is a king who serves rather than being served. This is a king who enters the holy city not triumphantly on a horse, but seated on a donkey. And as the crucifixion makes clear, Jesus' kingship or sovereignty is not of this world. Worldly kings take power from others by winning battles, or at least through successful diplomacy. Jesus neither fights nor allows his followers to do so. He does not mount a vigorous defense. Instead, Jesus offers an alternative to earthly kingship. I have been born and come into the world for this, to witness to the truth. Jesus' testimony to the truth appears embedded within the story of John's gospel. In chapter 19, the manner of Jesus' death testifies to his true identity. Those who can hear or see the message of his crucifixion, that his way of truth, love, embracing the holy in everyday life, really see a true king. And none of us want to be poor. None of us want to be the people loaded into cattle cars or taken to concentration camps, separated from our families. None of us want to be migrants fleeing persecution, famine, war, only to be trapped at a border or shipped back to certain death. None of us want to be taunted or teased, provoked, and attacked because of our skin color, our accents, our gender, sexual identities. Yet somehow the mob mentality seeps into our words, seeps into our jokes, seeps into our fears of others, and they grow greater. And before you know it, We find ourselves arming teenagers with semi-automatic weapons. Our need for yes, no, up, down answers allowed us to weaponize science, to turn the miracle of a vaccine into a political bludgeon. Our desire to be in control stops us from allowing nuanced conversations about consent, assault, predatory behavior, and allows us to justify the leadership of people known to prey on others. It wasn't just a special church holiday that Pope Pius XI instituted. As I said, he used all he had at his disposal. And he wrote encyclicals. It's a fancy name for papal letters. He wrote these against Mussolini's and Hitler's fascism, the anti-religious aspect of growing communism, the rise of anti-Semitism and racism in the United States, and he declared that the Vatican would not engage in war with any country. He toiled while mobs of Christians grew weary and distracted. So today we must ask ourselves, is Christ our sovereign? We ask this knowing what comes next in the story of Jesus. The mob takes over and mayhem ensues. We ask this knowing that next week we slip into the sweet quiet of hopeful anticipation of new life, of a fresh start. We ask this knowing that we, at one time or another, participate in that mob when we are driven to distraction, worried that somehow our things will be taken from us, worried that there isn't enough to go around, worried that people who don't look, sound, eat, dance, worship like us might infringe on our rights. And bit by bit by bit, we turn away from those who are poor, those who are the migrants, those who are hurt, those who are lonely and injured. And bit by bit, we turn our backs to Christ, our sovereign. What emperor do we bow to? Do we pledge our loyalty to a kingdom not of this world, but in this world? Are we fearful or faithful? These are our questions today as we push aside those things that distract us from truth. These are our questions as we build a community of trusting truth seekers, living with gladness and joy. These are our questions as we live doing what justice we can, acting in mercy, and building a congregation that acts as if and teaches that really and truly the power of God's goodness can dwell within us. And yes, we can be beacons of light in this world. And these are our questions as we join to live into the beautiful realm promised, present, and waiting for us all. Indeed, is Christ our sovereign? Amen.